Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. In the heart of conservative Iowa, where skepticism toward the paranormal runs deep, stands an old farmhouse that harbours an extraordinary story of supernatural protection. The events that took place within its walls between 1977 and 1988 challenged the typical narrative of malevolent hauntings, presenting instead a case of what appears to be a benevolent spiritual guardian. This account, documented in 2000 by Emily Weaver, offers a striking contrast to the common perception of haunted houses as places of perpetual fear and torment. The story begins in 1977 when a young couple purchased the property, a farmhouse dating back to approximately 1898. Located in a small Iowa town where paranormal investigators would likely be dismissed as quacks, the setting of this story adds considerable weight to the credibility of its witnesses. The conservative, deeply traditional community and its general dismissal of supernatural phenomena makes the forthcoming testimonies all the more compelling. In this context, where paranormal research and its practitioners would be viewed with significant skepticism, the events that unfolded would nevertheless leave an enduring mark on all who witnessed them. The first manifestation of unusual activity occurred during Mrs. Weaver's pregnancy with Emily. While working on curtains for the baby's nursery, she was descending the staircase carrying a pair of jagged-bladed sewing shears when she stumbled and fell. Although she suffered a cut to her arm, the location of the injury seemed fortuitous. Had she landed differently, the accident could have endangered her unborn child. What followed was even more peculiar. The shears vanished completely. Mr. Weaver, who had rushed to help his wife after hearing her fall, joined in an extensive search of the house, but the implement had seemingly disappeared into thin air. Despite searching high and low, examining every corner of the property, there was no trace of the scissors. With the shears nowhere to be found, Mrs. Weaver had no choice but to abandon the curtain project entirely. It wasn't until 3 or 4 months after Emily's birth, in 1978, that the shears mysteriously reappeared on Mrs. Weaver's sewing table, precisely where they had always been kept. When Mrs. Weaver questioned her husband about finding them, he insisted he hadn't seen the shears since the day of the accident. This incident led Mrs. Weaver to speculate that some force had deemed her unsafe to handle scissors while pregnant and had intervened to protect her unborn child. The first indication of the protective presence that would become a constant in their lives. As Emily grew, the paranormal activity in the house intensified, manifesting in various ways that seemed more protective than threatening. The kitchen became a focal point of unexplained phenomena. The couple would hear someone apparently searching through the cabinets and drawers, accompanied by the distinct sounds of pots and pans rattling. These disturbances were clearly audible from the living room where they would be sitting, yet investigation always revealed an empty kitchen with no explanation for the sounds. The consistency and frequency of these occurrences made them impossible to dismiss as mere imagination or settling house noises. The spirits seemed particularly attuned to the family's movements and needs. When they returned home after dark, lights would mysteriously illuminate their way, switching on as soon as their car turned into the driveway, as if an unseen caretaker was ensuring their safe entry. In Emily's nursery, her mother would frequently discover the bassinet rocking on its own during nighttime checks. The gentle creaking would cease upon her approach, only to resume once she left the room, a phenomenon that Mrs. Weaver found more reassuring than frightening. These experiences began to shape the family's understanding of their unique situation, gradually accepting that whatever presence shared their home seemed intent on caring for their child. The protective nature of the presence became especially apparent during an incident involving a temporary houseguest. Despite Mr. Weaver's strong misgivings, the family had taken in one of Mrs. Weaver's old high school acquaintances, a woman known to associate with questionable individuals. Their hospitality, characteristic of their nature, had led them to offer her temporary accommodation in Emily's nursery. From her very first moment in the house, the guest reported feeling unwelcome, complaining constantly of an oppressive cold and an unsettling atmosphere. The Weavers attempted to reassure her, explaining that while the house was indeed old, there was nothing to fear. However, their guest's discomfort only intensified over the following 2 weeks, suggesting the presence had already sensed something about her character that the Weavers had yet to discover. The situation came to a dramatic head one night, well after midnight, while the Weavers and baby Emily slept peacefully. The entire household was awakened by the guest's terrified screams. When the Weavers rushed to investigate, they found her in a state of panic in the hallway outside the nursery. She claimed that as she attempted to enter the room, an unseen force had physically pushed her back, while a voice distinctly whispered, "Get out." Mr. Weaver conducted a thorough search of the room but found nothing unusual. The frightened guest refused to return to the nursery and spent the remainder of the night on the downstairs couch. The following morning, while retrieving items from the freezer, Mrs. Weaver made a disturbing discovery: illicit substances hidden among the ice cube trays. This revelation validated what appeared to be the spirit's judgment of character, and the guest was immediately asked to leave. The incident served as powerful evidence of the presence's protective instincts, particularly concerning young Emily's safety. A pivotal moment in documenting the haunting occurred during a Christmas dinner party hosted by Mrs. Weaver for her banking colleagues. Following dinner, as the guests gathered in the living room for conversation, a startled gasp from one of Mrs. Weaver's co-workers drew everyone's attention to the front entryway. There, at the bottom of the staircase, stood what multiple witnesses described as a misty or smoky apparition. The figure was distinctly feminine, with long hair and a flowing skirt, though it lacked clear facial features or feet. Several observers noted what appeared to be Native American or Asian characteristics in the spirit's stature and bearing. The assembled group watched in astonishment as the figure floated up the stairs before disappearing. What makes this sighting particularly significant is the calibre of the witnesses: bank presidents, accountants and tellers, all respected professionals from a conservative community. At the time of Emily's account in 2000, these witnesses still maintained remarkably consistent accounts of what they had seen that night, despite their traditionally sceptical backgrounds. Some speculated that the spirit may have been responding to the noise level of the gathering, concerned that it might disturb the sleeping child upstairs. Another dramatic manifestation of the spirit's protective nature occurred during an incident involving an oncoming tornado. While Mr. Weaver was away for the weekend, his wife was awakened in the middle of the night by loud knocking on her bedroom door. Concerned about an intruder and worried for Emily's safety, she cautiously checked the hallway, finding no one and confirming all doors remained locked. Attributing the sound to a dream, she returned to bed, only to be physically shaken awake moments later by an unseen force. It was then that she heard the tornado's sirens beginning to wail. Thanks to the supernatural warning, she was able to retrieve Emily and reach the safety of the basement in time. This incident, like the confrontation with the houseguest, demonstrated the spirit's ability and willingness to physically intervene when Emily's safety was at risk. The paranormal activity in the farmhouse persisted throughout Emily's early childhood, but ceased when the family moved away in 1988, when she was 10 years old. Notably, the presence did not manifest during or after the birth of Emily's younger sister the following year. While this might suggest the spirit's attachment was specifically to Emily, another possibility is that the entity's influence was simply bound to the farmhouse itself, that its protective power, whatever its source, could not extend beyond the property's boundaries. This interpretation would align with many traditional beliefs about spirits being tied to specific locations, though it would make the later nursing home incident more difficult to explain. This incident, occurring in 2000, would seem to call this theory into question. While working as a clinical practitioner in a nursing home, Emily encountered an elderly patient who made a remarkable observation. The 98-year-old woman asked Emily about the woman who is always with you, describing someone who dressed in a style reminiscent of the patient's own mother. This unexpected interaction suggested that Emily's supernatural guardian may have never truly left her side, but rather continued her vigilant watch in a more subtle form, maintaining her protective presence even into Emily's adult life. The identity of this protective spirit remains unknown, as does her reason for forming such a strong attachment to Emily. What sets this haunting apart from typical ghost stories is not just its benevolent nature, but the number of credible witnesses, conservative Midwesterners who, under normal circumstances, would have dismissed such supernatural occurrences outright. Their consistent accounts stand as compelling evidence of a spirit whose primary purpose appeared to be the protection and care of a single child, manifesting not through fear or malice, but through acts of guardianship that spanned more than a decade. The presence seemed to operate with clear purpose and intelligence, demonstrating an ability to discern character, anticipate danger, and interact with the physical world when necessary. From the mysterious disappearance of the sewing shears during pregnancy to the warning of a potential tornado, each intervention appeared calculated to ensure Emily's safety and well-being. The spirit's apparent ability to manifest visibly to multiple witnesses during the Christmas party, while unusual for such encounters, provided crucial validation of the family's experiences. The question that continues to intrigue Emily Weaver and those familiar with her story is not whether the spirit was real, the evidence for that seems clear, but rather who was this mysterious guardian and what inspired such dedicated protection of one specific child. Like most mysteries of the supernatural realm, these questions remain unanswered, unlikely to be ever fully understood. The experience has left a lasting impact on all who witnessed it, challenging their preconceptions about the nature of reality and the possibility of benevolent supernatural protection. The nursing home resident's observation suggests something profound about the nature of this haunting, that perhaps what began as a series of protective interventions in an old Iowa farmhouse evolved into something far more personal. If the spirit did indeed follow Emily beyond the boundaries of that property, it challenges our understanding of not just where, but why hauntings occur. Perhaps the true mystery lies not in the ghost's identity, but in what she recognised in Emily that warranted such enduring guardianship.